Social Justice Part 2. In this essay, we will be learning in depth about John Rawls' The Theory of Justice. We will also understand the concept of a free market in terms with equality. John Rawls' Theory of Justice 1971. If people are asked to choose the kind of society in which they would like to live, they are likely to choose one in which the rules and organization of society allowed them a privileged position. We cannot expect everyone to put aside their personal interests and think of the good of society, especially if they believe that their decision is going to have an impact on the kind of life and opportunities their children will have in the future. Indeed, we often expect parents to think of and support what is best for their children. But such perspectives cannot form the basis of a theory of justice for a society. So how do we reach a decision that would be both fair and just? John Rawls has tried to answer this question in his Theory of Justice. Rawls attempts to establish a reasoned account of social justice through the social contract approach. This approach holds that a society is in some sense an agreement among all those within that society. If a society were an agreement, Rawls asks, what kind of arrangement would everyone agree to? He states that the contract is a purely hypothetical one. He does not argue that people had existed outside the social state or had made agreements to establish a particular type of society. Rawls begins his work with the idea of justice as fairness. He identifies the basic structure of society as the primary subject of justice and identifies justice as the first virtue of social institutions. He considers justice a matter of the organization and internal divisions of a society. The main idea of a theory of justice asks, what kind of organization of society would rational persons choose if they were in an initial position of independence and equality and were setting up a system of cooperation? This is what Rawls sees as a hypothetical original position, the state in which no one knows what place he or she would occupy in the society to be created. After considering the main characteristics of justice as fairness and the theoretical superiority of this approach to utilitarianism, institutionalism, or other perspectives, Rawls looks at the principles of justice. He identifies two principles. One, that each person should have equal rights to the most extensive liberties consistent with the other people enjoying the same liberties, and two, that inequalities should be arranged so that they would be to everyone's advantage and arranged so that no one person would be blocked from occupying any position. From these two principles, Rawls derives an egalitarian conception of justice that would allow the inequality of conditions implied by equality of opportunity, but would also give more attention to those born with fewer assets and into less favorable social positions. In the second part of the work, Rawls considers the implications of his view of justice for social institutions. He discusses in detail equal liberty, economic distribution, and duties and obligations, as well as the main characteristics of each that would make up a just society. He does not, however, identify any particular type of social or political system that would be consistent with his theory. He deals only with the demands that his version of justice places on institutions. In the third and final section, Rawls deals with the ends or ultimate goals of thinking about social justice. He argues for the need to have a theory of goodness, and he makes a case for seeing goodness as rationality. Then he turns to moral psychology and considers how people acquire a sentiment of justice. Finally, he examines the good of justice, or how justice is connected to goodness. Rawls argues that in a well-ordered society, ideas of goodness and justice must be consistent with each other. A theory of justice is widely recognized as an essential contribution to thought about the nature of justice. However, even supporters of Rawls acknowledge that his work raises many questions. The assumptions behind a theory of justice are essentially redistributive. That is, Rawls posits equal distribution of resources as a desirable state, and then argues that inequality can be justified only by benefits for the least advantaged. Resources are produced by people, and that people have rights to the things that they produce. Thus, attempts to improve the condition of the least advantaged through redistribution are unjust because they make some people work involuntarily for others and deprive people of the goods and opportunities they have created through time and effort. Other critics have focused on the idea of the original state and the wheel of ignorance used as a thought experiment to approximate the original state. The claim that rational individuals behind a wheel of ignorance would choose the greatest possible equality has been challenged as arbitrary and unverifiable. Rational individuals might well choose a social structure with large rewards for the majority of people and small rewards for the minority on the grounds that one is more likely to end up as part of a majority than a minority. Moreover, the wheel of ignorance of where one will be in a society also takes away all knowledge of what one will do. The reluctance of Rawls to identify any particular type of society as just may leave Rawls open to the charge that he offers no guidance for the actual content of justice. For example, proponents of a highly unequal and competitive market economy may argue that the abundance of wealth produced by the preferred system contributes to the absolute standard of living of the poorest people in society. The fundamental idea that justice is a matter of the basic structure of society is also open to question. To say that the basic structure of society can be made just or fair is to say that it can be designed both hypothetically and actually. Some social thinkers argue that societies are not designed per se. They are produced through history and by complex webs of interaction among individuals and institutions. From this perspective, justice is a characteristic of specific acts or processes within social systems, such as legal actions or political mechanisms, and it is misleading to extend the concept of justice to a society as a whole. Free markets versus state intervention. Should the government intervene in the economy? One of the main issues in economics is the extent to which the government should intervene in the economy. Free market economists argue that the government intervention should be strictly limited as government intervention tends to cause an inefficient allocation of resources. However, others argue that there is a strong case for government intervention in different fields. Arguments for government intervention. Greater equality. Redistributes income and wealth to improve equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. Market failure. Markets fail to take into account externalities and are likely to underproduce public or meritorious goods. For example, governments can subsidize or provide goods with positive externalities. Macroeconomic intervention. The intervention to overcome prolonged recessions and reduce unemployment. Arguments against government intervention. Governments liable to make the wrong decisions. Influenced by political pressure groups, they spend on inefficient projects which lead to inefficient outcomes. Personal freedom. Government intervention is taking away individual decision on how to spend and act. Economic intervention takes some personal freedom away. The market is best at deciding how and when to produce. Arguments for government intervention to improve equality. In a free market, there tends to be inequality in income, wealth, and opportunity. Private charity tends to be partial. Government intervention is necessary to redistribute income within society. If you have an income of £2 million a year, an increase in income to £2.5 million gives only a marginal increase in happiness or utility. For example, your third sports car gives only small increase in total utility. However, if you are unemployed and surviving on £50 a week, and a 10% increase in income gives a substantial boost in the living standards and quality of life. Therefore, redistributing income can lead to a net welfare gain for society. Therefore, income redistribution can be justified from a utilitarian perspective. In a free market, inequality can be created not through ability and handwork, but privilege and monopoly power. Without government intervention, firms can exploit monopoly power to pay low wages to workers and charge high prices to consumers. Without government intervention, we are liable to see the growth of monopoly power. Government intervention can regulate monopolies and promote competition. Inherited wealth. Often the argument is made that people should be able to keep the rewards of their hard work. But if wealth and income and opportunity depend on being born in the right family, is that justified? A wealth tax can reduce the wealth of the richest, and this revenue can be used to spend on education for those who are born in poor circumstances. Rawls' social contract. Rawls' social contract stated that the ideal society is one where you would be happy to be born in any situation, not knowing where you would end up. Using this social contract, most people would not choose to be born in a free market because the rewards are of a small minority of the population. If people had no idea where they would be born, they would be more likely to choose a society with a degree of government intervention and redistribution. Government intervention to overcome market failure. 1. Public goods. In a free market, public goods such as law and order and national defense would not be provided because there is no fiscal incentive to provide goods with a free rider problem. That is, you can enjoy without paying them. Therefore, to provide public goods like lighthouses, police, roads, etc., it is necessary for a government to pay for them and out of general taxation. 2. Merit goods or positive externalities. Goods like education and healthcare are not strictly public goods, though they are often referred to as public goods. In a free market, provision tends to be patchy and unequal. Universal education provided by the government ensures that in theory, everyone has the opportunity to gain education which has a strong social benefit. Macroeconomic intervention. In recessions, there is a sharp fall in the private sector spending and investment, leading to lower economic growth. If the government also reduces spending at the same time, there is an even bigger fall in economic growth and collapse in confidence. In a deep recession, governments can borrow from the private sector and spend the money to employ unemployed resources. If there is a collapse in the money supply, there may be a role for central bank or government to print money. Similarly, the government may need to prevent an economic boom and explosion of credit. Keynesian economists argue that the government can positively influence the economy through fiscal policy. Monetarists believe monetary policy can help encourage economic stability, though an independent central bank may not be considered government intervention. Arguments against government intervention in economy. When the government spend on public goods and merit goods, they may create excess bureaucracy and inefficiency. State-owned industries tend to lack any profit incentive and so tend to be run inefficiently. Privatizing state-owned industries can lead to substantial efficiency savings. Politicians don't have the same market discipline of seeking to maximize the use of limited resources. Government intervention causes more problems than it solves. For example, state support of industries may encourage the survival of inefficient firms. If governments bail out banks, it may create a moral hazard wherein the future banks have less incentive to avoid bankruptcy because they expect a government bailout. Real business cycle theorists argue that at best, government intervention makes no difference to the length of a recession, but may just create additional problems such as the accumulation of public sector debt. Conclusion. There is no real model of a society run in the absence of government intervention. Even the most extreme libertarian economists would accept that there needs to be some state protection of property rights and spending on national defense. Key notes to remember in this essay are: Rawls attempts to establish a reasoned account of social justice through the social contract approach. This approach holds that a society is in some sense an agreement among all those within that society. Rawls begins his work with the idea of justice as fairness. He identifies the basic structure of society as the primary subject of justice and identifies justice as the first virtue of social institutions. He identifies two principles. 1. That each person should have equal rights, and 2. That inequalities should be arranged so that they would be to everyone's advantage. The assumptions behind a theory of justice are essentially redistributive. Arguments for government intervention. Greater equality. There is redistribution of income and intervention to overcome prolonged recessions, and it reduces unemployment. Arguments against government. Arguments against government intervention. Governments are liable to make the wrong decisions. Government intervention is taking away individual decision on how to spend and act. There is no real model of a society run in the absence of government intervention.